Have you ever found yourself stuck in this endless loop of replaying yesterday's conversations in your head? It's like a mental movie marathon that you just can't turn off. So the other day, I fought with one of my friends and I found myself thinking, why did she say this? What did she mean by this? Did she think I was rude? Should I have said something else? Or maybe I should have said it differently? Maybe I should give her a call today and clarify. But no, I don't like calling people. Maybe I should text her. And then before I knew it, I had lost 3 hours overthinking about this. And I'm sure this has happened to a lot of us, right? There are things that we think about. Maybe we've had a fight with a friend. Maybe we've had a critical conversation with our manager. Maybe things at work have not been going too well, right? And we spend endless hours thinking about this. So welcome to the world of overthinking. So in today's episode on Mental Health Unplugged, we're diving a little deeper into the concept of overthinking and exploring what we can do about it. So overthinking is not really new to any of us. We were all worried about something or the other in our lives, invariably things that are not going too well. It could be finances, it could be family, it could be relationships, it could be career. And we all spend time worrying about this, right? And sometimes we spend too much time thinking about it. But when do we know that it is too much time and we are overthinking and not adequate thinking about it? Right? So invariably, overthinking is what we would call a negative habit, right? And it also causes a lot more stress than it should. And the reason it causes this amount of stress is because we're invariably harping on the negatives, right? We're dwelling on the negatives that have happened in the past, or we're worrying about something that is going to happen in the future, and we're unsure of it, right? So that little element of uncertainty is what makes us worry about things that might happen in the future. And this kind of worrying, this kind of overthinking is stressful. And given that we're thinking about the problem so much, we invariably don't find it beneficial because we don't really act out on any of the solutions that we might come up with, right? So that is why overthinking is more stress than more beneficial, than it being more beneficial. So I personally love this analogy of our thoughts being like monkeys, right? So there's this Buddhist notion of the monkey mind where we all have an inner monkey that is jumping from one thought to the other. It is jumping from one branch to the other. And there's a lot of endless chattering that is going on. And the more we start to overthink, this monkey becomes hyperactive and it starts jumping frantically from one branch to the other. There is no destination. There is no goal in mind. There's just a lot of jumping back and forth. And the monkey's all highly excited, right? And this is what happens in our mind, right? We don't have an end goal when we're overthinking. We don't have a destination. We just have a lot of thoughts, convoluted thoughts that are just going around and around in our mind, and that causes a lot of stress for us. It's hard to recognize when we're caught in this downward spiral of overthinking. That's mainly because the brain tries to convince us that the more we think about something, the more chance of finding a better solution, or the more chance of us making the same mistake that we've made in the past. But in fact, the opposite is actually true. Analysis paralysis is a very real concept. And this happens because when we overthink, it increases the negative emotions that we are experiencing in that particular scenario, right? So there's a lot of misery, there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of anger. And when emotions invariably get heightened, it clouds our judgment. It also prevents us from being able to take decisions and from being able to act upon these decisions. Now, after listening to all of this, you must be getting a little frustrated and wondering, when I know it is so bad for me, why do I keep doing it? Right? And there are 2 important points to keep in mind when you think like this. One is that we don't really overthink on purpose, right? It's not a deliberate act that we're doing. Overthinking has become a habit, and it is a default pattern of thinking. So when we are trying to rest, when we have a certain unappealing task in front of us that we need to complete, we invariably start to overthink about a lot of situations, maybe something that has happened 10 years ago, maybe something that happened just yesterday. Our mind jumps into this default way of thinking because it has become a habit, because it has become a pattern in our mind, right? So it is definitely not a deliberate act on your part. It's not like I'm going to decide that, hey, tonight I'm going to spend 2 hours overthinking and I'm going to lose sleep over it. It just doesn't work that way. Another thing to keep in mind is that at its root, overthinking has always served a very self-protective mechanism, right? It has always served to protect us. So when I face something unpleasant, I'm convinced, the brain convinces me that if I'm able to rethink and think about that scenario, I'm going to prevent it from happening again in the future, right? And that is why it starts to become a habit, because I'm reinforcing the overthinking by telling myself that if I think, I'm going to make sure that it doesn't happen to me again in the future. Or if I think about it, I'm bound to find a better solution. Hence, I need to think about it, right? And this is why it has become a mistakenly a protective mechanism for us. What we can do instead is to be able to look at thinking more in terms of constructive thinking rather than overthinking, right? So when we're thinking about something constructively, we're looking at it in a more efficient and in a more problem solving manner, right? So our thinking is more problem solving oriented, whereas when we are overthinking, it is problem oriented. When you're constructive thinking, it is solution oriented, right? So you're thinking of what you can do. So you assess the situation, you look at your goals, you look at the steps that you need to take to be able to reach your goals, and then you start to plan accordingly. So here your constructive thinking is beneficial. It is leading you towards an outcome. Sometimes it may not necessarily be a positive outcome. It can be a neutral outcome. Sometimes it may not really work in your favor and it can be a negative outcome, but it is still an outcome that happens because of your action. Whereas in overthinking, there is no action and hence there is no outcome that comes up from it. Now, this being able to look at constructive thinking versus overthinking is just one way of being able to deal with it, right? So I'm not really going to be able to cover every way of dealing with overthinking in such a short video, but keep in mind that there are ways of being able to tackle it. Another way of looking at it is using the if-then strategy, right? So a lot of our overthinking comes up in the form of, if this happens, it's going to be devastating. If that happens, I'm going to lose my job, right? So when we have a lot of if thinking, follow it with a then thinking, right? So if this happens, then I am going to do so and so and so. If my manager fires me, then I'm going to do A, B, and C. If my friend fights with me, then I have this to do, that to do, that to do. So you have a lot of follow-up action plans that you can work on in case that devastating scenario plays out, right? So this is called the if-then strategy, and that helps because it helps you to look at what you can do and what is within your control, because when we worry, we invariably focus on things that are outside of our control. So when you start to look at constructive thinking, when you start to look at problem solving, you start looking at the little bits that are there in your life that is within your control, that you can use to be able to help you come out of a slightly difficult situation. In conclusion, what I would like to say is that overthinking invariably is very different from thinking, right? So overthinking happens when you are not able to control your thinking. It comes up in times where it starts disrupting your day-to-day life, right? You're not able to control it, and hence it becomes a very debilitating feature in your life. And that is when you actually need to be able to reach out to a mental health professional to be able to get some kind of guidance and support. CBT has been found to be quite effective in terms of being able to deal with overthinking. You learn to be able to reframe your thoughts. You learn to be able to challenge negative thoughts that you may have. You also learn to make changes in your lifestyle, whether it is your food intake, whether it is the daily habits that you have in terms of substance use and abuse. You learn to be able to rest well, exercise better, make sure that you keep a healthy lifestyle. There are other techniques like meditation, like being mindful, like journaling, that may all help you with your overthinking and being able to work on that, right? So definitely do reach out to someone if you feel that you find that your overthinking has been coming in the way of being able to lead your best life. There's definitely nothing wrong with reaching out for support. And if you found this video helpful, do share it with others, and take care, spread the cheer.